Bruce Nichols here. It's 12/15/2012, 12:12 a.m. I want to talk about an experience I had in jail. There was this woman CO, a very beautiful woman, drove an Escalade, had nice diamond rings on, and all the other inmates, all they could ever see when they looked at her was a piece of meat. But when I looked at her, I saw a lot of pain in her eyes, a lot of anger, a lot of unreleased energy. It was very negative energy. And she absolutely did her best to treat the male inmates with as much disrespect as she could. One time I had a visit with my wife and my children, and they called the visit off 10 minutes early. It was supposed to go a full 2 hours. Well, they called it off 10 minutes early, and she starts screaming at the inmates to start putting up the fucking chairs. And she was really rude, and then I walked by her. I gave my daughter a hug, my daughter Lillian, who's 4, and she screamed right in my face, "I told you to put up some fucking chairs." And of course, you know, at jail I was going through a spiritual awakening, and everything was being questioned. Every action I did, I questioned. And I looked at her and I wanted to get mad at her. I wanted to scream at her. And I took myself back and I looked at her and I said, "Can you please not swear in front of my daughter?" And that was huge. That was, I'm an inmate. In jail, you really are made to feel like you have no rights. There's no security at all for an inmate. And then the CO is like, you know, who's this inmate saying this to me? And she told me, "I told you to put up some fucking chairs, so put them up." And she screamed right in my face. And I looked at her and I said, I asked you nicely not to swear in front of my child." And she told me how I was a no good inmate, I was a straight piece of shit. I told my wife and kids at that moment to just go. I'll see them soon. And she went on to tell me that, like, I've never swore in front of my kids. Who the fuck am I? If I was such a good, honest person, I wouldn't be in jail. I'm probably in for swearing and abusing my kids. And she went on, and my blood was boiling. Man, when I wanted to kill her, I wanted to take this the CO, this correctional officer, and just throw her, because my kids didn't deserve to see that. She told me that I'm a no good felon and that I'll probably be in and out of jail my whole life, and she was just very, very, very mean. And I had inmates who didn't even like me, just because I was white, you know, who were actually patting me on my back, telling me, "It's alright, man, it's alright." And she just kept on going and going and going. And I went to my room, I got on my knees and I prayed. I said, "God, allow me to forgive her. Release this energy that's negative. I don't want to hate her. I understand she's angry." And I went to church for the last hour from about 8 to 9, and every hour we had a count for 16 hours. So after church, we got in line for count, and who was doing the count for the CO? It was that woman. And now remember, I had prayed. I prayed that for forgiveness. I prayed that this energy between us would end. And now I come up, and I got all these inmates behind me, and she looked up at me. And she said, "I'm sorry. I apologize for swearing like that in front of your children, and I shouldn't have reacted that way." And I told her, "Well, you're already forgiven. I forgave you already. It's done. It's over with." And she said, "Well, can you call your wife or tell your wife and kids I'm sorry?" And I said, "It's already done. Our hands are washed of it. They already forgave you." And this CO's face literally went from completely tense to just the art of forgiveness, which is hard. It's hard to come by, but it's worth mastering if you can. I'm still mastering it, and I held out my hand, and now I'm an inmate, and I'm in front of all these other inmates, and you don't shake a CO's hand, but I knew that this was a moment to change something amongst inmates and COs, and she needed that, and I held out my hand, and she goes, I really am sorry. And I said, I told you, you're forgiven, it's all done, it's been squashed, I gave it to God. And I held out my hand, and she looked at it, and she took it, and she shook my hand. Now, just an hour earlier, I wanted to scream and yell and mutilate this woman with my words. And now here we are shaking hands. It doesn't matter our differences. We're all the same. We're all human. I don't care what bad you've done. I don't care what I've done. I don't care. Neither should you. There's always room for forgiveness. There's always room for love. Especially between two human beings. Even between an inmate and a correctional officer. Even between two lifetime enemies. Even between a murderer and the victims. There's room for forgiveness.